And the real history of petroleum exploration is not the wildcatters drilling a well off somewhere and getting lucky. It's drilling a well and forcing your will onto the rocks, making the rocks do what you want, cracking them, fracking them. And it starts with Colonel Roberts, Edward Roberts, who was, the story as he tells it, he was in the Civil War, he was a colonel for the Union, and so he takes his troops to Fredericksburg. And the Battle of Fredericksburg was an incredibly bloody battle, especially for the Union. The Union was in the low area, the Confederate troops were in a high area, and they were raining shells down on the Union. So Colonel Roberts was sitting there, he was trapped, and he noticed that when shells fell onto ground, they exploded one way. But when they fell into this ditch with water, the weight of the water would tamp down the explosion, and the explosion would tend to go out. And he thought to himself, this could actually have some real implications. So he leaves the military, and he goes out to western Pennsylvania, and he convinces people that this new drilling that's going on, if they would just put one of his torpedoes, he called them torpedoes, down at the bottom of a well, fill it up with water, and then activate the torpedo, it would create a fracture. Because back then, if you drilled a well, you could come inches away from an oil seam, and it would be a dry well. But if you explode this bomb at the bottom of a well, you would create these new fractures, and maybe it would hit an oil seam. And lo and behold, he starts doing this, and as it turns out, this is incredibly successful. Colonel Roberts, who invents the torpedo, ends up one of the richest men in the United States, partially by suing anyone who tried to copy his invention. So the history of sort of man's dominion over rock, trying to drill a well but then do something with a rock, goes back to the beginning. And right about the middle of the century, you still have some wildcatters. They're mostly gathered around Houston. But you have this interesting gentleman named George Mitchell, son of Greek immigrants. And he is one of the first wildcatters, so to speak, who's no longer going to just try to go off and find the oil. He is more interested in figuring out, can we use modern science to make better wells? And he learns about fracking, because at this time fracking's starting to come back, the big giant gushers are gone, and he leases a bunch of land north of Fort Worth and is making good wells and is doing an early stage of fracking at that time, much smaller than what we have today, and is making these wells work. But each time he drills down there, he realizes that underlaying the oil reservoir he's shooting for is another rock, very dense, shale rock, and the tools show gas. Each time you go in there, there's gas that's being shown. So he, for 16 years, from 1982 to 1998, says to his company, go and try to figure out how to open up that shale, how to make a good well into that shale. It doesn't matter if you can't do it, or it's all right, we're just going to do us a few wells a year. And for 16 years, he plods along and basically has one failure after another. He's learning a little bit. Sometimes he gets a little oil and gas out. It's mostly gas up there. And then in 1998, one of his young engineers tries a new form of doing this, a lot more water, a lot more pressure, and it is by far and away the best well they've done in 16 years. And that turns the corner. So 1998, all of a sudden, the industry begins to figure out that they can use water with chemicals added to slicken it and lots of pressure to break open these incredibly dense shales.